Hello, today we are going to be taking notes on statistical questions. This is the first topic in our new unit on statistics and probability. And today's notes are basically on how do we form questions that can be used for experimental purposes or for data gathering purposes. And so statistical questions have some very specific qualities that we're going to find so that you are able to be a statistician and gather data based upon your life and experiences. And so that you can use that data to form tables and graphs and to relate to each other and to form other questions. So our essential question, the question that you should be able to answer at the end of today, is how can I create a good statistical question? Because there are some questions that just are not good for statistical purposes. This is from 6 SP1. And you should be able to identify a statistical question. And so you might be asking yourself, okay, I need to be able to form a statistical question, but what exactly is a statistical question? In order to do these notes, you also need to be prepared to have 2 Postit Notes. You will be using them on the notes, as well as later we'll be using 2 different colors to color and identify. So you need to make sure that you have those 2 things out and ready to go. If you need to gather them, you can we can pause the video a moment so you can get the supplies that you need. Otherwise, we can keep going. A statistical question. A statistical question is a question that has different answers. So it's a question that doesn't just have one answer. Well, an example of a one answer question would be if I were to ask Marty, do you like avocados? Well, Marty would either say yes or no. That's not a statistical question because there's only one particular answer that would be given. A statistical question is something that has many, many different possibilities for answers. The answers can be in the form of numbers, or they could also be given in the form of words. So we could ask what are the ages of students at Dartmouth Middle School, and in that case we would have numbers like 10, 11, 12, 13, or we could say what are the favorite colors of students at Dartmouth Middle School, and we would have words like purple, green, blue, or whatnot. So either would be acceptable. At this point we're going to take our Post-it notes, and we are going to, on the first Post-it note, we're going to write statistical questions. And we're going to place that right here. And on the second Post-it note, we're going to put it right next to it, and we're going to write non-statistical questions. So we need to know the definition or the components of both statistical questions and non-statistical questions. So the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to talk about statistical questions. What do they have in common? So I'm going to take my Post-it note, I'm just going to slide it to the side, and I'm going to put some information here that goes with what is a statistical question. Firstly, a statistical question has what we call variability. Variability. And variability basically is just a term that means it has many different options or answers. When you think of a variable like x, a variable we talked about is an unknown number, or it's a number that could have many different values. So x could be 2, it could be 3, it could be 5, it could be 1/2, it could be a bunch of different things, and it would change the expression based upon what the variable's value is. So with this, in the contents of a statistical question, when I mean variability, I'm saying that it could have many possible answers that could be in place. So we're going to say it has variability or many different possible answers. Okay, so that's the first thing that it should have. The second thing is that he needs to have a stated population. Now that sounds weird. Like we think about like the population of the United States or the population of the world. But really what it means is who are you asking this question to? It needs to be clearly stated. So when I was talking earlier about what is the favorite color of students at Dartmouth, the population would be the students at Dartmouth. It's what we're talking about. It's the certain group of people. And that's important because you need to be clear about that. So when I'm doing a statistical survey, I do not want to say, okay, I want to know all students what their favorite color is. Well, that's a very broad population because I could be talking about students in college. I could be talking about students in kindergarten. I could be talking about students in high school. I could be talking about students in California. I could be talking about students in Washington. I could be talking about students with blue eyes. We don't know what students I'm talking about. It's not very clear. It needs to be a very clear, this is the population of people that we're surveying. So that is a very important part of a statistical question. Does it have a very clear population or group of people or group that it is questioning? And we should be able to represent data. Meaning, we should be able to form a chart or a table or a line graph or a box and whiskers plot or some type of form where we can take the surveying that we did or the experimenting that we did, and we should be able to put it in some type of a graphical format so that we can understand the data that's being presented. And we'll talk more about that as we go into how to survey, but just be clear that you should be able to gather data and you should be able to represent it in some way. So that's the things that we're looking for. Those three things are the only things you're looking for when you're looking at a statistical question. So I'm going to move my little Post-it note back on to cover that is a statistical question. Now I'm going to move the what is not a statistical question. Not a statistical question would be it has one answer. And I would say, possibly you could also have one or two answers, meaning yes or no. It doesn't have a population or unclear population. Like we talked about with students, it needs to be very clear who exactly are we surveying. And that's basically the gist of it. So you want to ask a broad group of people. If I were to say, hey, Matthew, what's your favorite color? Or, Matthew, is your favorite color blue? He is going to answer me with a yes or a no, right? Well, that's not a statistical question because it's a yes or no answer. It's only got one possible answer. Now, it's also not a statistical question because Matthew is not a population. Matthew is a person. He's one. So if I were to say, what are the favorite colors of all Matthews at Dartmouth Middle School? Then I have a population because there's more than one Matthew at our school. I've got more than one in my classes. So that would be more of a population question. I'm actually surveying. And think about surveying. When you're surveying, you're not asking one person because that one person would just give you their opinion. You want to know a broad opinion or a broad group. And so you definitely want to make sure that you have a clear population in order for it to be a statistical question. Okay, so now that we understand what is a statistical question and what is not a statistical question, we are going to now look at an example. So here's an example. Our example is how many books did the students at Dartmouth read last summer? Now, class, is that a statistical question or not a statistical question? It's statistical. It is a statistical question. So my first question is, Does it have a yes or no answer? It's got a broad range, right? Because some students might say, I read 6 books. Some students might say, I read 3 books. Some students might say, I read 1 book. I read no books. So there's different possibilities in their answers. It's got variability. Then my second question is does it have a population? Raise your hand if you can tell me what the population of that question would be. What is the population, Adriana? The students at Dartmouth. It's a very specific group of students that we're looking at, right? Good. So that would be indeed a statistical question. So I'm going to just, first of all, I want to underline the students at Dartmouth. That's your population. Just to make sure that you're clear about that. And also, is it something that we could represent with a data chart or some type of a graphic organizer of some method? Could we organize this data, collect the data, and could we keep track of it in an organized way? Yeah. So that would be a very good statistical question. All right, so now we have 2 more statistical questions, and we're going to look at those questions. We're going to decide, are they statistical or are they not statistical? The first question, how many students got A's on their test? Statistical or not statistical? I'm hearing some statistical and I'm hearing some not statistical. So my first thing is, how many students got A's on their test? Is there a variability to that answer? Is there multiple answers?
Yes.
So my question is, if I were to restate the question as, what grades did students get on their test? Is there variability in that? Could students get A's? Could they get B's? Could they get C's? If I were to pull 100 students and ask them, did you get an A? And then I counted up those answers, I'm going to have a very specific answer because you either got an A or you didn't get an A. There's only one or another answer. There's no variability in there. It has to be that there's multiple options for answers. And they don't have multiple options for answers because all we're asking them is, did they get an A on it? So yes or no. That would not make it a statistical question. It's not a statistical question. And the other thing I would point out on here is, students, is that a very clear population? No, because we don't know what students we're specifically talking about. So I would say that that is, in fact, not a statistical question. Let's look at the next one. How many students? Now, I know it says students, and I know that's not ideal because we want it to be a little bit more specific. So we're going to change that, and we're going to say how many 6th grade students got A's from each math class. So now you'll notice that the difference here is we added the 6th grade students, so we made the population a little bit more clear. And then we said A's from each math class. So think about that as we were relating to like a data table. You would have Mrs. Engel's class, how many A's? Then you'd have Miss Geoff's class, how many A's? Mr. Zimmer's class, how many A's? Miss Van Wagner's class, how many A's? And would that give you variability? Yes, because there's multiple answers, right? It's not just one particular answer that you're getting. You have multiple answers from across multiple classes. In that way, it is in fact a statistical question. So let's look at now page 108. And this is where we needed to have a couple of different colors. So we're going to go back to, 107. And on 107, the question is, it says, color each statistical question red and each statistical question, or each one that is not a statistical question, yellow. Now, I didn't tell you specifically colors, so here's what I want you to do. I have an orange and a yellow. So instead of coloring my statistical questions red, I'm going to color them orange. So I'm just going to mark that I'm doing orange. You can do whatever color you're going to do, underline it. If you have a dark color, I would not color all the way over because you'll lose the words and it won't be good for reviewing. But as long as you clearly state which color you're going to do for which, that's fine. All right, let's look at the first question. How old is the oldest student in the school? Statistical or not statistical? Raise your hand if you want to give me your idea. Genesis. Non-statistical, why? There's lots of students, and it's going to only give you one student, right? Because it's only asking what is the oldest student. It's not asking about all the other ones. Okay. Good. How many students brought lunch today? Statistical or not statistical? It is not statistical because you're going to get one answer, right? It didn't say like how many students in the different math classes brought lunch today. It's one answer. You're going to find out 300 students brought lunch. It's only one in particular answer. You would need more variability. Okay, how many students brought lunch every day this week? Okay, so that is going to be not statistical because, once again, you're looking at one particular number. Now, you could change that to make it statistical if you were to say how many students brought lunch on the different days of the week. So then you would be looking at how many brought lunch Monday, Tuesday, and such. All right, so at this point, I'd like you to go through, continue filling in this with what you think are statistical and non-statistical questions. Then you're going to add your questions and summary. Thank you, and have a good day.